The quiet of the Cascade Mountain foothills shattered that morning as Officer Sarah Mitchell drove her patrol route along the old logging road in rural Washington state. A tiny figure flashed in her rear-view mirror. A small German Shepherd puppy was running full out after her cruiser, its paws kicking up dust, a desperate, furry projectile refusing to give up on the highway's shoulder. She slowed down, the common thought running through her mind, just a lost dog. But the instant she stopped, the puppy sprinted straight to her, barking frantically, its intelligent brown eyes wide and filled with a stark, undeniable urgency. Something was wrong. This wasn't just a stray looking for a handout or a belly rub. This creature was trying to tell her something important, the frantic, almost human quality of its behavior making her own pulse quicken under her uniform shirt. She made the immediate, gut-wrenching decision to follow the little pup into the thick, ominous Pacific Northwest woods, and what she discovered mere moments later left her absolutely speechless and changed her entire life forever. The old logging road stretched endlessly beneath the soft, filtered glow of the morning sun. Mist hovered over the colossal ponderosa pine treetops like a pale, ghostly veil, and the distant, constant hum of nature filled the cool air. Rustling leaves, the sharp chirping of Steller's jays, the occasional, startling crack of a dry twig under an unseen animal. Officer Sarah Mitchell adjusted her patrol cap, the fabric stiff with institutional starch, and exhaled slowly, her tired eyes scanning the winding dirt path ahead of her vehicle. It was her third month on the rural patrol unit, a quiet, almost meditative duty far from the suffocating chaos of city calls back in Seattle. She didn't mind the solitude. Out here, there was a profound peace, something her heart had been desperately missing since her partner's tragic passing the previous year. The vast, silent forest, in its relentless, ancient indifference, was her only true companion now. Her cruiser rolled gently along the uneven, rutted track, tires crunching softly over the loose gravel and pine needles. The radio crackled occasionally with distant, garbled chatter, but nothing urgent, nothing immediate. She sipped her lukewarm coffee, the bitter taste grounding her as she mused over how life had dramatically slowed down, how utterly strange it was to find deep, unexpected comfort in such absolute solitude. But peace, she had learned in her line of work, often served as the quiet, almost terrifying calm before something completely unexpected and life-altering. Her hand rested casually on the steering wheel, knuckles white against the black plastic, when a sudden, jarring movement in the rear-view mirror caught her trained attention. At first, it seemed only like a flicker of shadow, a cheap trick of the early morning light playing off the dusty glass. Then she saw it clearly, a tiny German Shepherd puppy, impossibly small against the backdrop of the massive trees, was running with all its might behind her car. Sarah frowned, easing her heavy boot off the gas pedal and letting the cruiser drift. The puppy, barely older than a few months, was chasing the car with a surprising, almost maniacal determination, small paws pounding relentlessly against the dusty road, ears flopping wildly, tail down and stiff, but the forward momentum steady. She slowed to an absolute crawl, instantly curious, and watched in the mirror as it kept pace effortlessly, barking faintly as if trying to deliver an urgent, critical message. "What on earth, little buddy?" she murmured to the empty cab, pulling the cruiser to the side of the road and stopping completely with a sigh of pressurized air from the brakes. The moment she stepped out onto the gravel, her leather duty belt creaking, the puppy ran straight to her, panting hard, its soft fur speckled with loose dirt and sticky twigs. It looked up at her with those bright, pleading brown eyes, eyes that were not filled with the typical fear of a stray, but with a raw, undeniable desperation. Sarah knelt slowly, the movement tight in her joints, holding out a calm, gloved hand. "Hey there, little one. Are you lost?" she asked softly, her voice an almost foreign sound in the vast silence. The puppy barked once, a sharp, emphatic sound, then immediately turned around, glancing back toward the daunting wall of the woods before looking pointedly back at her. It wasn't random, it urgently wanted her to follow it. Sarah straightened, her patrol boots crunching the gravel as she glanced at the impossibly dense forest that loomed beyond the road like a dark, silent giant. Something about the way the puppy kept glancing back and forth, checking on her, sent a cold chill racing down her spine. She quickly scanned the area. No collar, no nearby vacation cabins or houses, no sign of an owner, just endless towering trees and a heavy, waiting silence. Her finely tuned instincts whispered that this was not an ordinary stray seeking a handout. As she crouched again, the puppy tugged lightly, insistently, at her uniform pant leg, whining with a newfound, heartbreaking urgency. Sarah's heartbeat picked up speed, the frantic, must-go now feeling in the dog completely infectious. Whatever it was desperately leading her to, it absolutely couldn't wait for her to radio it in. She took one last, lingering look at the empty, indifferent road behind her, then whispered to herself, the voice barely a puff of air, "All right, show me, little guy." And with that decisive action, Officer Sarah Mitchell followed the small German shepherd into the deep, encroaching woods, completely unaware that this narrow, unseen path would change absolutely everything. The forest canopy thickened immediately as Officer Sarah stepped off the gravel road, her heavy boots crunching over damp, aromatic soil and layers of fallen, soggy leaves. The little German shepherd puppy darted ahead, moving with surprising speed, pausing every few feet to look back at her as if making absolutely sure her heavy human form was still following the trail. "Easy there, I'm right here," Sarah murmured, brushing aside a long, needled branch that scraped against her shoulder. The sunlight that managed to pierce the thick, green roof broke through in soft, scattered golden beams, scattering bright, shifting patterns across the mossy, uneven ground. Every sound now felt acutely amplified. The nervous rustle of unseen birds, the faint, distant drip of melting dew, and the rapid, excited panting of the tiny creature leading her deeper and deeper into the terrifying unknown. At first, Sarah convinced herself the puppy might simply be lost, desperately searching for a hiker owner who had wandered off the trail near Mount Rainier. But as she watched the little dog move with single-minded purpose, stopping only to check on her, barking a command, then racing ahead again, a strange, heavy unease settled deep in her chest. This wasn't random puppy behavior, it wasn't running in confused circles or sniffing the ground aimlessly. It knew exactly where it was going, and it knew she needed to be there. "Hey, slow down, buddy," she called, her voice echoing unnervingly through the silent, massive trees. The puppy stopped again, ears perked high, its little tail twitching back and forth in a quick, anxious motion. Then it gave a sharp, impatient bark, tugged on a fallen branch that was blocking the narrow path, and slipped nimbly through a tiny gap between two ancient, moss-covered trees. Sarah sighed, the breath a plume of white in the cool air, and followed, her durable uniform brushing roughly against the abrasive bark as she squeezed through the tight space. On the other side, the ground dipped slightly, and faint, almost erased tire tracks were visible in the wet dirt, as if something large and heavy had recently been here and then left in an incredible hurry. Her police training instincts immediately kicked into high gear. She scanned the immediate area quickly, professionally. No obvious signs of people, no telltale smoke from a campfire, no noticeable movement in the periphery. Yet, her gut, the thing that rarely lied, screamed that this place had a dark, unspoken story to tell. The puppy whined again, a high, piercing sound, circling near a broken, rotting fence post, then bounded off abruptly toward a narrow, slick slope leading downhill. Sarah adjusted her portable radio, a familiar weight in her hand. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm off Route 19, approximately 2 miles north of Checkpoint Delta. I'm following what appears to be an abandoned or distressed animal, possibly leading me to an incident site. I'll update shortly." Only harsh, brittle static crackled in reply, the sound mocking her isolation. No actual response came through the speakers. The signal must have been critically weak this deep in the forest's rugged embrace. She frowned, tucking the useless radio back into the security of her vest and pressing onward down the dangerous slope. The hill grew noticeably steeper. Sarah's boot slipped slightly on the damp, treacherous ground, and the forest grew eerily quiet, only the soft, anxious whimper of the puppy breaking the deep stillness. She noticed its fur trembling violently, its intelligent ears low, its bark now a softer, almost sorrowful sound. Something ahead of them was clearly frightening the small animal. Sarah knelt quickly, running a soothing, reassuring hand along its trembling back. "It's okay, little one," she whispered, her own voice shaky, "we'll find out what's wrong together." The puppy looked up at her once more, those intense eyes filled with an urgent, unspoken plea, then bolted forward, faster this time, like a shot from a starting gun. Sarah stood quickly, the joints in her knees protesting, and ran after it, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs as she disappeared deeper into the ancient, silent woods, unaware that every step was taking her closer to a truth she wasn't remotely ready to face. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. Even the birds seemed to hold their breath in the dense canopy. Officer Sarah's pulse quickened as she followed the determined little German shepherd through the dark, winding maze of trees. The air was cooler here, damp with the heavy, organic scent of pine and earth. She felt a faint unease, not paralyzing fear, but the sharp, professional awareness that something wasn't right at all. Every step echoed softly beneath her heavy boots. The puppy moved ahead with single-minded purpose, occasionally stopping to glance back, whining softly as if urging her to pick up the pace. Sarah reached for her radio again, hope flickering. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I'm currently about half a mile east of Route 19, following a distressed animal that seems to be leading me towards something critical. Still no visual on any person or vehicle." Static answered her again, a flat, dead sound. She frowned. In these remote Washington state woods, dead zones were common, but it meant she was now effectively on her own, deep in the wilderness. She paused for a moment, considering her next move carefully. Protocol demanded she wait for backup or return to an area with a stronger signal. But her instincts, those same sharp instincts that had once saved lives on the job, whispered a completely different, urgent instruction. Something about the puppy's desperation felt overwhelmingly more human than animal. It wasn't lost, it was clearly, deliberately guiding her. "All right, kid," she muttered, looking at the small, dark figure ahead. "I'm trusting you on this one." The puppy barked once, a sound of affirmation, as if understanding her vow, and dashed ahead again, tail low, but wagging faintly. Sarah followed, brushing aside thick branches, stepping carefully over roots slick with morning dew. Her hand instinctively rested on her holstered weapon, not out of explicit fear, but out of ingrained caution. You never knew what dark secret you might find in places like this. An injured person, a cornered wild animal, or something far, far worse. They reached a small, unplanned clearing where golden sunlight spilled weakly through the canopy. The ground here looked noticeably disturbed, patches of mud, crushed leaves, faint, unsettling drag marks. Sarah crouched low, examining the prints. Too small to be vehicle tire tracks, too irregular to be a normal animal trail. Someone had been here, and recently. Her heartbeat quickened to a stressful rhythm. She looked up to see the puppy circling the spot, its nose pressed urgently to the ground, its tail stiff and straight. It barked once more, sharp and urgent, pointing her attention down. Sarah exhaled slowly, the air cold in her lungs. She had a choice. Turn back now and call for immediate assistance, or keep going, following a lead no human would have ever noticed. Her decision came easily, decisively. "Let's see where this takes us," she said quietly, her voice steady with resolve, but her stomach tight with raw anticipation. As the puppy bolted deeper into the forest, Officer Sarah Mitchell took a deep breath of the cold air and followed. She was unaware that her unwavering faith in this tiny stranger would soon uncover a horrifying secret that would break her heart and simultaneously restore her long-lost belief in miracles. The forest seemed endless, each heavy step pulling Officer Sarah deeper into its quiet, ancient mystery. The air was thick and cold with the potent scent of pine and rich earth, and shafts of sunlight pierced through the tall trees, dancing across the forest floor like scattered gold coins. Sarah's heavy boots sank slightly into the damp, yielding soil as she followed the small German shepherd puppy darting ahead. Its tiny form moved with astonishing confidence, as though every twist and turn of this hidden labyrinth was familiar. "Where are you taking me, little one?" she whispered, brushing away a low-hanging, sticky branch. Her voice barely carried, the overwhelming forest swallowed sound whole. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. Even the rustling leaves seemed to still, as if nature itself was waiting for some inevitable, terrifying event to happen. The puppy stopped suddenly, its ears perked, nose twitching rapidly as it frantically sniffed the still air. Then it turned in a frantic circle, whined softly, and began to walk much more slowly now, cautious, deliberate, terrified. Sarah followed its intent gaze and noticed faint, shallow impressions in the ground. Not definite footprints exactly, but uneven indentations, like someone had dragged something heavy and cumbersome through the dirt recently. She crouched down again, running her hand over them, the soil cold and loose. "That's not an animal trail," she murmured, the truth sinking in. Her chest tightened with a knot of dread. She rose quickly, scanning her surroundings with wide, desperate eyes. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, tall pines, thick shrubs, and a distant whisper of unseen, running water. Somewhere beyond the trees, a faint, unsettling metallic glimmer caught her eye. She squinted, stepping closer toward the light. It looked like the edge of something, maybe a piece of faded fabric or shiny metal, half buried beneath the decaying leaves. The puppy barked sharply, the sound snapping her attention back to the immediate danger. It ran toward the glimmer, pawing at the ground and whining urgently again. Sarah approached slowly, her heart pounding a heavy drumbeat. She knelt and pushed aside the dense layer of leaves and pine needles, revealing a small strip of cloth, bright pink, frayed, and completely soaked in dark mud. It looked exactly like part of a baby blanket or maybe a child's small jacket. A deep, bone-chilling cold ran down her spine. "This can't be random," she muttered under her breath, a tremor in her voice. She looked at the puppy, whose intelligent eyes seemed locked on her face, full of desperate expectation. "You found this, didn't you?" she whispered, reaching out to gently pat its head. The little dog licked her hand once, a quick, cold swipe, then looked back toward the woods, barking again, commanding her forward. Sarah rose, following its determined lead once more. Her pace quickened, adrenaline now completely replacing hesitation. Something deep inside her, the trained officer, the grieving woman, the protector, told her she was terrifyingly close to uncovering something that mattered more than anything. As she followed the puppy through the thickening trees, the pale sunlight dimmed further and the air grew heavier, colder. Every instinct screamed that whatever waited ahead was not just important, it was a matter of life or death, right now. The deeper Sarah went, the heavier the oppressive silence grew. Even the air felt different, colder, stiller, carrying an eerie, crushing weight that pressed hard against her chest. The little German Shepherd puppy slowed its pace, glancing back at her often, tail tucked low beneath its body, but wagging faintly, as if torn between its deep fear and its undeniable duty. Sarah's flashlight, now necessary, cut a thin beam through the deep shadows, revealing twisted roots and fallen branches scattered across the forest floor. Every step forward felt like walking blindly into the ultimate unknown. Then she saw it, finally. At the edge of a small, hidden clearing, half hidden by wild ferns and loose dirt, something pale caught her terrified attention. She moved closer, her breath shallow, held tight in her throat. It was a blanket, a soft, small pink one, crumpled and damp from the pervasive morning dew. Next to it lay an overturned stroller, cheap and plastic, one wheel missing entirely, the handle bent and broken as if it had been flung aside in a sudden, brutal hurry. Sarah froze instantly, her heart began to pound a deafening rhythm in her ears. She scanned the immediate area carefully, professionally. There were distinct drag marks leading away from the damaged stroller, faint, but clearly visible in the loose soil. The puppy ran ahead, barking sharply, circling the crumpled blanket as if demanding her attention to the spot. "Easy, buddy," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts. She crouched beside the stroller, inspecting it with gloved hands. The flimsy fabric was ripped. There were faint, dark scratches on the metal frame, like it had scraped violently against something rough and sharp. A freezing chill ran through her entire body. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7, she said into her radio, her voice low but firm with purpose. "I found signs of possible distress. An abandoned stroller and personal belongings. No sign of anyone nearby. Requesting immediate backup and medical response." Static answered her once again, the radio a cold, useless lump. The signal was still dead. The puppy whined, tugging insistently at her sleeve. Then it ran a few feet ahead and barked again, louder this time, almost frantic with despair. Sarah followed its gaze toward a patch of obviously disturbed earth just beyond the clearing. Her throat tightened with terror. The soil looked freshly moved, uneven, messy, like someone had tried to quickly and hastily cover something. She approached cautiously, her hand instinctively resting on her sidearm, the cold metal a small comfort. "Stay back," she murmured to the puppy, though it absolutely refused to listen, its urgency overriding her command. It pawed frantically at the ground, whining with a raw, heartbreaking urgency. Sarah knelt beside it, brushing her hand through the loose, cold soil. A faint sound met her ears, soft, fragile, almost impossible to believe in this remote place. A tiny, desperate cry. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. It wasn't an animal sound, it was human, small, weak, desperate for air. Her breath caught as the puppy barked again, digging feverishly, mud flying. Sarah dropped to her knees, her own hands joining the little dog's frantic efforts as pure, blind panic surged through her veins. Something, or someone, was buried beneath the disturbed dirt. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps, her heartbeat echoing a furious drum in her ears, louder than the silence. The faint, broken cry pierced through the stillness again, fragile, human, utterly desperate for help. For a terrifying moment, she froze, trying to locate the exact source of the sound. The little German Shepherd puppy dug frantically at the loose soil, whining louder, its paws flying as dark dirt scattered in all directions. Sarah dropped completely to her knees beside it, pure adrenaline surging through her. "Keep going, buddy, you're almost there," she urged, her voice shaking violently as she clawed at the ground with her bare, aching hands. The cries grew louder, tiny, gasping, and uneven. Sarah's chest tightened with overwhelming emotion. She brushed away another frantic handful of dirt and froze. A small fabric edge appeared beneath the soil. It was the same bright pink blanket she had seen before, now torn and caked with thick mud. Her stomach twisted with immediate, nauseating dread. She dug faster, her hands raw and scraped, her heart pounding as every single second felt like an eternity. Then she saw it clearly, a tiny, mud-caked hand. "Oh God," she breathed, her voice a raw, trembling whisper. "It's a baby." Her instinct snapped into razor-sharp focus, her training taking over the terror. "Stay calm," she told herself out loud, a desperate mantra. "Stay calm, Sarah." She gently cleared the rest of the soil away until she uncovered the small, horrifying figure completely. A baby girl, barely a few months old, her lips pale blue, her breathing faint, shallow. Sarah's hands shook uncontrollably as she carefully lifted the hypothermic infant from the cold ground, brushing sticky dirt from her tiny, pale face. The puppy barked softly beside her, its tail wagging uncertainly, as if asking if the baby was finally safe. It's okay, little one," Sarah whispered, though her voice broke halfway through the assurance. She quickly pulled off her police jacket, ignoring the cold, and wrapped the shivering child tightly in it, holding her close against her chest for body heat. The baby whimpered weakly, her little fingers twitching against the rough jacket fabric. "You're all right now, I've got you," Sarah promised the tiny, frail life. Sarah looked around frantically. She needed help, immediately. "I need a signal," she muttered, fumbling for her radio again. Still nothing. She swore under her breath, a flash of pure anger, and stood, scanning the tree line for an exit. "I have to move now," she said more to herself than anyone else, making a split-second decision. The puppy barked once, then began running ahead again, pausing to make sure she followed its lead. Holding the infant close, Sarah pushed through the dense undergrowth, her heavy boots sinking into the wet mud. Every sound felt sharper now. Every gust of wind, every leaf rustle, and the tiny, fragile heartbeat against her chest, steady and real, giving her immense strength. When she stumbled back into the faint clearing light near the road, the puppy circled her legs, barking short, sharp cries of relief. Sarah pressed her radio one last time, climbed to higher ground, and shouted with every ounce of air she had, "This is Officer Mitchell. I have an infant alive but in critical distress. I need emergency extraction now." The forest finally seemed to breathe again, the silence momentarily lifted. But Sarah knew this was only the terrifying beginning of the fight for this tiny life. Sarah's voice echoed with raw urgency as she clutched the infant tighter against her chest. "Stay with me, sweetheart," she whispered, her breath hitching with emotion. The baby's cries had grown faint again, the tiny body shivering despite the thin warmth of Sarah's jacket. Panic clawed at her throat, but her ingrained training took over immediately. "Stay focused. Act fast. Don't let fear win this." The little German shepherd ran ahead, barking urgently, pausing only to ensure Sarah was still following its desperate path. She stumbled hard over roots and branches, her boots slipping sickeningly in the mud as she fought to move quickly, efficiently. "Come on," she muttered to herself, pushing through a thorny bush. Just a little farther to the road, her radio still hissed uselessly with static in the thick woods. She needed open ground, somewhere the signal could finally punch through the dense trees. The puppy's barks echoed like a guiding beacon through the pines, leading her toward a faint, welcoming glow ahead. Breaking through the dense underbrush, Sarah emerged onto the narrow, familiar dirt trail. The bright sunlight hit her face, and she gasped for air. "Dispatch, this is Officer Mitchell," she shouted into her radio again, her voice cracking with relief and strain. "I've recovered a live infant. Immediate medical assistance required at Route 19, Trail Junction." This time, a faint, metallic voice answered through the static. "Copy that, Unit 7, hold position. EMS en route, ETA 4 minutes. Relief flooded her body, but she knew time was already running out. The baby's breathing was perilously shallow now. Sarah knelt swiftly, loosening the jacket to check the infant for further injuries. The tiny face was pale, lips trembling, and a faint, dark bruise was visible on one cheek. "Hang on, little one," she whispered, her voice breaking. She gently pressed two gloved fingers against the infant's neck. The pulse was weak, thready, but still miraculously there. She wouldn't stop now. She ripped open her first aid pouch, pulling out a foil thermal blanket and wrapping it carefully around the baby's tiny body. The puppy sat patiently beside her, whining softly, its eyes locked on the child. It was as if the dog completely understood that every second was a battle. Sarah placed the baby close to her chest again, sharing her body heat, rocking gently back and forth. "You're safe now," she murmured, tears welling in her tired eyes. "You're safe." The distinct sound of sirens pierced the air in the near distance, a beautiful, loud promise of help. Sarah's shoulders sagged with the sudden, overwhelming force of relief. She looked down at the heroic puppy, who wagged its tail weakly, its soft fur still matted with mud and dirt. "You did this, little hero," she said softly, stroking its head with reverence. "You saved her life." As the flashing ambulance lights came into full view, Sarah rose to her feet, clutching the baby close to her heart. The forest that had once felt endless and terrifying now opened before her like a final path of light and salvation. For the first time since her partner's death, she allowed herself to truly believe. Maybe fate had brought that tiny, desperate puppy to her patrol car. Maybe this was never an accident at all, but a predestined miracle. The blare of sirens grew deafening as the ambulance pulled up hard beside the patrol car parked near the forest trail. The paramedics, two of them, jumped out before the tires had even stopped turning, their boots pounding against the dirt as they rushed toward Sarah. "Over here, I have her," she shouted, her voice hoarse but steady. Her arms ached from holding the infant so tightly for so long, but she refused to let go until the professionals were ready. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell in uneven, shallow rhythms, fragile, but miraculously alive. One of the paramedics, a woman named Kelly, knelt beside her, her movements fast and trained. "You did good, officer," Kelly said quickly, expertly taking the baby into her arms and checking her pulse. "She's hypothermic and severely dehydrated, but she's fighting hard." Sarah exhaled a shaky breath, tears she hadn't realized were there finally spilling down her mud-streaked cheeks. "Please save her life," she whispered, a desperate plea. Kelly nodded once, wrapping the infant in thick, warm medical blankets while another medic prepared the oxygen mask. The puppy whined nearby, pacing anxiously, its fur still matted with the evidence of its heroics. It barked once when the baby whimpered, as though afraid they might take its charge away forever. "It's okay, little one," Sarah said softly, kneeling beside the pup and stroking its head. "They're going to help her now. You did your job, little hero." The paramedics worked with practiced, flawless precision, their calm urgency filling the cold air. The dense forest around them seemed to momentarily fade into a blur. No wind, no distant birds, just the rhythmic beeping of the medical monitors and Kelly's quiet, authoritative commands. "Pulse is stabilizing," Kelly murmured, her voice tight with professional relief. "She's absolutely going to make it." Sarah covered her mouth, a profound, crushing wave of relief washing over her. Her entire body trembled violently as the pure adrenaline drained away, leaving her weak and shaken. She looked at the tiny, fragile bundle of life, now surrounded by competent professionals, realizing just how agonizingly close they had come to losing her forever in the cold mud. Unseen guardian. Dog saves baby from certain death. And then her eyes fell on the small, unassuming puppy, sitting patiently at the edge of the clearing, staring at the baby with unblinking, unwavering devotion. In that powerful, silent moment, Sarah understood everything. The dog hadn't been looking for a cheap handout or a place to sleep. It had been looking for help, for a badge, a uniform, a human capable of action. Somehow, that tiny, determined creature had known exactly where to go, who to find, and precisely how to bring them back to the exact location just in time. When the medics lifted the baby into the bright ambulance, the puppy tried desperately to climb in too, whining with genuine alarm. Sarah caught it gently, expertly, cradling the small, muddy body against her chest. "Easy, hero," she murmured, her voice thick and unsteady with emotion. "You've done more than enough today, my friend." As the heavy ambulance door slammed shut and the loud siren wailed back to life, heading down the gravel road, Sarah stood frozen, the cold forest breeze brushing her face. The puppy nestled securely against her, its eyes still fixed on the rapidly disappearing vehicle down the long, winding trail. In that profound silence, Sarah whispered, the words barely audible, "You didn't just find me, you truly saved her." Miracle rescue. Puppy leads cop to abandoned infant. The massive hospital parking lot buzzed with a muted, quiet urgency as Officer Sarah Mitchell stood near the emergency entrance, the little German Shepherd puppy tucked gently and securely in her arms. Inside, doctors and nurses rushed through the brightly lit hallways, their voices muffled and indistinct behind the sliding glass doors. Sarah watched through the window as the baby, now safe and warm inside a clean incubator, was surrounded by a team of dedicated medical staff. The infant looked so small, so devastatingly fragile, yet somehow still possessing the sheer strength and will to hold on to life. The realization made Sarah's chest painfully tight. Officer Mitchell, a detective, approached her, flipping open a small, worn notepad. "I'm Detective Ethan Hale, Child Protection Unit. You're the one who found the infant?" Sarah nodded, her voice still low and strained. "Not me," she said softly, glancing down at the puppy nestled securely against her. "He did." Hale's eyebrows rose sharply in disbelief. "The dog?" Sarah told him everything, a concise, powerful account. How the puppy had chased her car, led her deep into the dense, disorienting forest, and flatly refused to stop until she found the tragically buried baby girl. Hale scribbled notes furiously into his pad, occasionally glancing down at the heroic dog in utter disbelief. "So there was no one else at the scene? No other tracks, no vehicle?" he asked, his tone skeptical but professional. "Only an overturned stroller and a pink blanket," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "But it definitely didn't look like an accident. Someone tried deliberately to hide her." The detective frowned, digesting the grim facts. "We'll have forensics comb the entire area," he said, closing his notepad with a decisive snap. "Whoever left that child there clearly didn't expect anyone to find her alive." Those cold, heavy words sank into Sarah like ice water. She looked down at the puppy, who whined softly and licked her hand with unwavering loyalty. "But someone did," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He did. German Shepherd puppy saves baby from being buried alive." Hours later, Sarah sat alone in the quiet waiting area, the puppy curled up, heavy and fast asleep, on her lap. The harsh hospital lights flickered softly above her head. Every few minutes, a nurse passed by, giving brief updates. The baby was stable, steadily gaining warmth, breathing strongly on her own. Relief flooded Sarah's chest, but so did a barrage of questions. Who was the mother? Why abandon her child in such a cruel, desperate way? And why was this dog, this canine angel, alone in that desolate forest? When Detective Hale returned, his face was grim and serious. "We didn't find anyone nearby, dead or alive," he confirmed. "But there were traces, faint footprints, subtle tire marks. Someone drove off that logging road very recently. We're checking nearby crash reports now." Sarah nodded silently, staring down at the polished, cold floor. The puppy stirred, pressing its small, warm body closer to her. Sarah smiled faintly and stroked its soft fur. "Don't worry," she whispered into its ear. "We'll find out where you came from, little guy. You've already done your part." But deep down, she felt something else entirely. A strange, unshakable premonition that the incredible story between this tiny, brave dog and that fragile baby was far, far from over. Uncovering the mystery. Puppy leads police to crash site. The next morning dawned gray and heavy with dense mist, completely obscuring the Washington peaks. Officer Sarah Mitchell stood at the forest edge once more, the haunting memory of yesterday playing in her mind like a tragic echo. The air smelled strongly of wet earth and pine, but beneath it lingered something darker, heavier. The horrific, unanswered question of how that baby had ended up buried under leaves in the absolute middle of nowhere. The little German Shepherd puppy trotted beside her on a lead, tail low, sniffing the ground with focused, intense concentration. Detective Hale and a specialized forensics team worked methodically around the original clearing. Bright yellow tape fluttered sharply in the damp breeze, marking the small, solemn patch of disturbed earth where Sarah had first found the infant. Hale crouched by the overturned stroller, lifting it carefully with gloved hands. "No fingerprints worth lifting," he muttered, disappointed. "Too much moisture exposure." But this, he gestured to a nearby bush where a faint metallic glint caught the low light. Sarah stepped closer, eyes narrowed. It was a chrome car emblem, torn violently from a vehicle, the kind found on older sedans. Hale bagged it quickly. "If this came from the crash, we might finally have our lead," he said with renewed focus. One of the forensics officers approached with a grim, serious expression. "Detective, we found distinct skid marks deeper in the woods. Looks like a vehicle veered off the road hard, maybe during the storm 2 nights ago." Sarah's heart sank with a new, heavy dread. So it wasn't an abduction attempt? She asked, the tension clear in her voice. Hale shook his head slowly. Possibly an accident, but that still doesn't explain why the baby was deliberately buried. The puppy began barking suddenly, an excited, determined sound, running toward the deep tree line. Sarah followed, her boots crunching over twigs and wet soil. Beyond the thick brush, she saw it, the twisted, silver wreckage of a sedan, nearly completely hidden beneath a massive fallen pine tree. The sight froze her where she stood, every muscle tense. The windshield was totally shattered, and the driver's side door hung open at an impossible angle. Hale and the forensics team rushed toward the wreckage to examine it. Inside the crumpled interior, they found a woman's purse, half crushed beneath the dashboard panel. Sarah picked it up gently, her gloved fingers brushing over a small, laminated photograph inside. The picture showed a young woman, smiling, holding a baby, and the same German Shepherd puppy sitting playfully at her feet. Her throat tightened unbearably. "It's her," Sarah whispered, her voice thick with realization. "The baby's mother." Hale exhaled heavily, a sound of profound sadness. "Looks like she tried to walk out after the crash, officer. She probably couldn't make it to the road." His voice softened with deep respect. "Maybe she left the baby somewhere safe, hoping that someone would find her soon." Sarah knelt beside the wreck, tears stinging her eyes immediately. The puppy whimpered quietly, pressing its nose against the twisted car door, a clear sign of recognition. "You tried to bring help, didn't you, boy?" she murmured, placing a hand on the car. "You never stopped trying." For the first time since she arrived, the forest didn't feel silent and ominous. It felt sacred, like it held the powerful echoes of a mother's final, desperate love and a dog's unbreakable, eternal loyalty. Mother's final act of love, baby Hope's rescue. The crash site now told a story more powerful and heartbreaking than any cold police report could capture. The wrecked sedan sat twisted around the trunk of the massive pine tree, its metal frame scarred by days of rain and time. Officer Sarah stood beside it in profound silence, the little German Shepherd puppy pressed close to her leg, a small, warm anchor. Detective Hale's team moved carefully, photographing every single detail. The shattered windshield, the broken mirror, the scattered belongings half buried in the mud. It was as if the forest itself had been actively keeping a terrible secret, when it was only now ready to fully reveal. They found the woman's ID tucked inside her purse. Her name was Laura Evans, 28-year-old resident of Pinebrook, a young single mother. In the photos they recovered, she smiled brightly, holding her infant daughter tightly in her arms, the same baby now recovering, stable, in the hospital. She was coming from the next county over, Hale said quietly, scanning the map coordinates on his phone. Looks like she took a wrong turn during the storm and simply lost control of the vehicle. Sarah swallowed hard, her chest heavy with emotional grief for the stranger. "But why bury the baby, detective?" she asked, still struggling to comprehend the trauma. Hale sighed, shaking his head. Maybe she thought she was protecting her. It's possible the mother was severely injured, disoriented, perhaps concussed. She might have been trying to shield the child from the freezing cold, thinking someone would find her before the storm lifted. The tragic image broke Sarah's heart. A young mother alone in a dark storm, doing the absolute last thing she could to save her child before collapsing herself. And beside her, this tiny, brave dog who absolutely refused to leave his post. One of the forensics officers called out from behind the car, "Detective, we found something else, down here." He held up a small, delicate charm bracelet, a fine silver band with two tiny pendants. One shaped like a heart, the other exquisitely engraved with the name Hope. Sarah stared at it, tears welling in her eyes instantly. "That must be the baby's name," she whispered, the name fitting perfectly. The puppy walked closer to the wreckage, sniffing the ground near the driver's side door, his movements slow and sorrowful. Then, without warning, it simply sat down, lowering its head gently to its paws. The gesture was quiet, almost reverent. Sarah knelt beside it, gently resting her hand on the dog's soft back. "You stayed," she murmured, her voice trembling with emotion. "You never left her side. Not even when she couldn't come back for you." Detective Hale removed his hat respectfully, holding it over his heart. "We'll ensure she's buried properly," he said, his voice quiet. "She deserves that much honor." Sarah nodded slowly, too choked up to speak. She looked at the puppy again, the only survivor who had bravely carried this entire story across miles of treacherous forest. In that powerful, silent moment, she understood everything. Laura Evans may have tragically died in that storm, but her final, selfless act of love lived on entirely through this small, brave creature. A determined messenger of pure hope who absolutely refused to give up until someone finally listened. The hero dog's unbreakable loyalty. Officer adopts German Shepherd. The rain began to fall again as the forensics team packed up the last of their equipment. Officer Sarah Mitchell stood motionless beside the wreck, her uniform damp and clinging, her thoughts heavy with sorrow. The forest that had once felt alive with urgency now seemed hollow, like it had finally exhaled the very last breath of its painful secret. The little German Shepherd puppy sat quietly beside her, its fur wet and clinging to its small frame. It wasn't barking now, just watching, its amber eyes reflecting something that felt almost profoundly human. Pure, selfless grief. Sarah knelt beside the puppy, her knees sinking into the soft mud. "You waited for her, didn't you?" she whispered, stroking its head with affection. The puppy lowered its ears and whimpered softly, a tiny, heartbroken sound. It had followed its owner through a terrifying storm, stayed faithfully by her side through the fatal crash, and when it finally realized she wasn't waking up, it went searching for help, for a miracle. That thought hit Sarah like a physical blow. "You must have walked miles and miles," she said, her voice trembling. "All alone, injured, and you still came back." Detective Hale approached quietly, a small notebook tucked under his arm. "They confirmed it," he said gently, nodding toward the wreck. "The mother didn't make it. She likely died from severe internal injuries within hours after the crash impact." Sarah didn't respond immediately. She kept her eyes fixed on the puppy, feeling a tight lump form in her throat. "She was trying to save her baby, officer," Hale added, explaining the forensic findings. "She must have hidden the child under that blanket before collapsing from her injuries." Sarah wiped her eyes quickly, trying to stay professionally composed. "She did save her," she whispered, correcting him gently. "Because of this little one." The detective nodded sadly. "We'll contact the county animal shelter about the dog now," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "They'll make sure it's taken care of, but—" Sarah's head snapped up instantly, her eyes meeting his with fierce determination. "No," she said firmly, decisively. Hale blinked in surprise at her vehemence. "No, detective, I'm absolutely not letting him go to a shelter," she continued, her voice unwavering. "He's been through more than enough trauma. He's coming home with me." For a long moment, Hale just looked at her, understanding and respect dawning in his eyes, and then quietly he nodded. "All right, Officer Mitchell. He's yours." Sarah exhaled slowly, relief mingling with profound sorrow. She reached out and lifted the little puppy into her arms, holding him close. It nestled immediately against her chest, letting out a deep, tired sigh of absolute safety. "You're safe now, little hero," she murmured, her tears finally falling freely onto his wet fur. Behind her, the wind stirred the tops of the massive trees, carrying with it the soft, clean scent of pine and fresh rain. Sarah looked back one last time at the twisted wreck, at the dark place where a mother's love had tragically ended, but also where a new, unbreakable bond had fiercely begun again. "Let's go home, hero," she whispered, turning away from the tragic scene forever. From Stray to Partner. The life of Hero the German Shepherd. The weeks that followed felt like a blur of police reports, media calls, and surprisingly restless nights. The story of the miracle puppy spread like wildfire across the country. Newspapers, national television anchors, and online headlines universally hailed it as the most heartwarming animal rescue of the year. But for Officer Sarah Mitchell, it wasn't just a sensational story. It was something deeply personal, something that had fundamentally changed her life. Every morning, she woke up to find the little German Shepherd, whom she had officially named Hero, curled safely at her feet, sleeping soundly, finally at peace. The name couldn't have been more perfectly fitting. He had gone from a lost, frightened puppy to a national symbol of loyalty, selfless courage, and the living proof that love doesn't need human words to be understood. Hero adjusted to his new, comfortable home quickly. He followed Sarah absolutely everywhere, through the station halls, riding shotgun in the patrol car, and even in her small backyard, where he'd chase falling autumn leaves like a child seeing them for the very first time. The other officers adored him, often stopping by Sarah's desk just to give him a treat or a congratulatory pat on the head. "You've got yourself a real partner there, Mitchell," one of them said with a genuine grin. Sarah smiled, a warmth she hadn't felt in years spreading through her. "Yeah," she replied softly. "The best one I've ever had." Meanwhile, Baby Hope, as the nurses had officially named her, inspired by the small bracelet, was recovering beautifully, thriving in their care. The hospital arranged a small visitation day for the police department, and Sarah was the first to volunteer to attend. When she walked into the nursery, Hero, trotting gently beside her on a leash, every nurse in the room stopped what they were doing and watched silently. The baby's eyes fluttered open, and she let out a soft, delighted coo. Hero wagged his tail furiously, sitting patiently beside the crib, his head tilted slightly in recognition. Sarah watched, tears blurring her vision. The connection between them was raw and undeniable, as if the tiny infant distinctly remembered the strong, familiar heartbeat that had once echoed beside hers under that muddy blanket in the dark woods. Outside the nursery window, reporters gathered again, their cameras flashing relentlessly. Sarah gave a short, powerful statement, nothing dramatic, nothing rehearsed. "A mother's extraordinary love saved that baby," she said, her voice clear. "And this little guy here, Hero, he just bravely finished what she started." That night back home, Sarah sat quietly by the fire, Hero's head resting contentedly on her lap. She stared at the framed photo on her mantel, the one of her, Hero, and baby Hope from the hospital nursery. The flames danced softly in Hero's amber eyes as he looked up at her face. And for the first time in years, Sarah felt something she hadn't known she'd permanently lost, a profound, lasting peace. "Welcome home, Hero," she whispered, stroking his fur gently. The miracle continues. Hero meets baby Hope on her first birthday. Months passed and spring finally returned to Pinebrook. The snow had melted completely, the towering trees bloomed again in vibrant green, and the once silent roads now echoed with birdsong and new life. Officer Sarah Mitchell stood outside the Children's Care Center, her heart pounding softly as she watched Hero wag his tail excitedly beside her. The little German shepherd had grown stronger, taller, but still possessed those same gentle, world-weary eyes that had saved a life so long ago. Today was a very special day. Inside the center, nurses whispered excitedly, baby Hope was turning 1 year old. Her recovery had been nothing short of a medical miracle. Doctors still marveled at how a child found half buried in freezing soil had survived without any lasting harm. Sarah took a deep breath and stepped through the doors, Hero trotting proudly, confidently at her side. The moment Hope saw them, something truly magical happened. The baby, now chubby-cheeked and full of energetic curiosity, squealed in immediate delight. Her tiny hands reached toward the dog immediately, her eyes sparkling with definite recognition. Sarah froze, her throat tightening with powerful emotion. "She remembers you," she whispered, her voice trembling with the sheer impossibility of it. Hero wagged his tail faster than ever, lowering himself gently to the floor as the baby crawled excitedly toward him. With careful, astonishing gentleness, he nudged her small hand, then licked it softly. Hope laughed, a pure, innocent, musical sound that instantly filled the room with genuine warmth and happiness. The nurses smiled, tears glistening brightly in their eyes. "It's like she truly knows him," one of them said quietly, deeply moved. Sarah knelt beside them, running her hand through Hero's soft fur. "She does," she murmured, tears falling freely. "He was there before anyone else was. He was her guardian when the entire world forgot she existed." For a long, quiet moment, time seemed to stand absolutely still. Hero sat proudly beside the baby, his large ears perked, his eyes calm and protective. Hope leaned comfortably against him, resting her head on his side, a picture of perfect peace and connection that words could never fully capture. The head nurse approached Sarah, smiling warmly. "We've had many adoption inquiries for her," she said softly, "but we're waiting for the right family. Someone with the heart to love her the way her mother did." Sarah nodded, her gaze never leaving the two beautiful souls in front of her. "She's already loved," she whispered, "because someone never stopped fighting for her life. The dog who saved me. New life and unbreakable bonds." As they left the center later that day, Hero looked back once at the building, then up at Sarah. She smiled faintly, a genuine, powerful feeling in her chest. "You did good, Hero," she said. "You brought her to safety and, in doing so, you gave me back my heart." The sun dipped low behind the trees, painting the vast sky gold and amber. And for the first time, Sarah felt that the forest's tragic story, the story that began with profound loss, had finally found its beautiful way home. The evening sun cast long, golden rays across the quiet, grassy field behind Sarah's home. The air was soft and warm, carrying the sweet scent of blooming grass and fresh pine. Hero lay beside her on the porch, his sleek fur glinting in the light, his head resting gently on his paws, utterly content. Sarah rocked slowly in her old chair, watching the horizon fade into deep amber hues. It had been many long months since that fateful, tragic day in the woods, months that had fundamentally changed her entire life forever. She often thought about Laura Evans, the young mother who had given absolutely everything to protect her child. Sometimes Sarah would drive past the small memorial by the old pine tree, where wild flowers now grew delicately between the moss and bark. A small plaque sat at its base, engraved with the powerful words, "A mother's love never dies. It only finds new ways to live." Hero would always sit patiently beside the plaque, his tail still, his eyes fixed on the forest beyond. Sarah knew what he was thinking, or perhaps what he was permanently remembering. He had carried the mother's final, desperate act of love directly into the world, and in doing so, he had single-handedly rewritten both their stories. That night, Sarah opened her personal notebook, something she hadn't done in years, her hands steady. She began to write, not a police report, not a case file, but a profound, personal message. A message for anyone who might stumble upon this incredible story one day, on YouTube or anywhere else. Sometimes angels don't arrive with bright, majestic wings. Sometimes they come with paws, small, muddy, trembling paws, that bravely carry the weight of real miracles. She paused, tears softening her tired eyes, and looked down at Hero. "You've done more good in this entire world than most people ever will," she whispered, her voice full of pride. The puppy raised his head slightly, his tail thumping softly against the wooden porch floor. Sarah smiled faintly, genuinely. "You taught me something I had forgotten long ago," she continued. "That love, real, transformative love, never needs to be spoken out loud. It's felt deeply, it's shown through action, it saves." As the sun finally disappeared below the trees, Hero stood and walked closer, resting his heavy, comforting head on Sarah's lap. She stroked his fur slowly, the immense warmth of his presence completely grounding her. Somewhere far away, a beautiful baby named Hope slept peacefully, safe in the arms of her new, loving family, her story forever bound to the little dog who refused to give up until someone listened. Sarah closed her notebook, whispering into the quiet night wind, "Thank you, Hero, for finding her, and for finding me." The night deepened, and the distant, cold stars flickered brightly to life above them,